Good morning, everyone. My name is Jayaan Benjamin, and welcome to our first webinar on our four-part series, Becoming Successful in Your Career. Thanks for joining us on this four-part series where we will provide an inside perspective into the careers of four successful women and the challenges they have faced on their respective journeys. For more information regarding upcoming events and webinars, join our subscription list or go to our website, shapeyourfuture.us. Without any further ado, today we will be getting an inside look into the life of photographer Tracey Adams. Thanks for joining us, Tracey.
Thank you for having me. Wow, I'm so honored to be the first one as part of your series.
Sorry, you're actually the third. I accidentally.
Oh, I thought you said
it's okay.
first.
You're the first photographer. You're the first photographer.
Nevertheless, I'm so honored. Thank you very much. So basically, I am a photographer / photojournalist. I work for a very popular local newspaper in the Western Cape, and it's called the Sunday Weekend Argus. And the Sunday Weekend Argus forms part of a lot of different newspapers across the province of South Africa, of the Western Cape and South Africa. And here in the Western Cape, we have the Cape Argus, the Cape Times, the Saturday Weekend Argus, and then it's my title, the Sunday Weekend Argus, as well as the Daily Voice and a whole bunch of community newspapers. So I said photographer / photojournalist because photography is a sort of journalism, because you're telling stories, but instead of using words, you're using pictures. So that's me. I think that's just my introduction.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. I actually didn't know you worked for the Argus. I mean, I've read the Argus. I mean, my grandparents have read it for years. My next door neighbor, she worked for the Argus. So like, that is really good part of our lives, our everyday lives. And to be able to meet somebody who I'll be like, that picture, I know who took that picture, Tracey. So that's quite interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So yes.
No, it's okay. You can go first.
Yeah, it is a generational thing, and the hard copy newspaper, I believe it's read less by the younger generation because they're getting their news from online and on their tablets and phones and so forth. But for the older generation, they like the feel of the newspaper. It's about the tradition. In our home, when I was growing up, there was always that, I think it was 10 cents or 20 cents given every day to get an Argus and a bread, and so it was just the normal thing that you had in your house. I mean, you'd have a loaf of bread, and with it, you had to go and buy the Cape Argus for that day. So it has been a nice journey, just being part of that, and being able to kind of add to that kind of generational traditions that we have going here in the Western Cape.
No, definitely. I could definitely see how it would be a wonderful part. So I guess the first question then would be, what made you decide to become a photographer or video journalist?
I decided to become a photographer. It was very early in my life, and the passion really started with the curiosity when I was around probably 6 or 7 years old, when I was introduced to a camera and a photo album back then, when my two cousins, they were gifted each a camera and a photo album, and I was much younger than them and I was not allowed to touch it. And that, I think, started that intrigue and fascination, with this whole process, when I saw how they took pictures doing funny things and on their bicycles, and just the magic of giving that roll of film to their mother, and then she would go and develop it, and a week later she'd bring the pictures back. So initially that would be around your turnover time that you could expect your pictures back. It'd be 1 week, and it was fascinating to me, and seeing them stick these pictures down in their photo albums. You know, I was just completely fascinated, and it stayed with me. And you know, in high school, when of course you reach grade 10, I think,
Yeah.
10 or 11, and you have to sort of put down in writings, you know, what you think you would like to be. And I said I would like to be a photographer, and well, I was discouraged by my mentors, peers, a guidance teacher, you know, saying that it wasn't a really good career choice, and that it wasn't expected to pay a living, you know, where it could actually pay for a living. I think back then, you know, we were dealing with apartheid. People from our communities, we had these sort of traditional careers that we were expected to go into, and back then teaching was encouraged, you know, like nursing, secretarial work. You know, we still did typing as a subject in school.
Oh,
And
wow.
so yeah, and then you know, I was discouraged, and then I decided, well, all of these adults can't be wrong, let me choose something else as well. And I decided to choose food technology, but mostly because I was doing a subject called home economics, which was cooking. And so I thought, well, let's just do this. I mean, I'm not interested in anything else except photography. Let's just go with this. So I applied at CPUT, a different name at the time, and for both streams. And I thought, I'll just leave it and see what happens. At that time, they were only accepting 20 students a year for photography. I'm not quite sure how many for food technology. Anyway, I got in for both. And I had to make the tough decision, and my passion was with photography. And I just dived in and said, to hell with everything, all caution to the wind. And yeah, and it's been a good journey. It's been interesting. It's definitely one aspect of my life that I feel like I've done the right thing, you know, and I wouldn't change anything.
Well, that actually really sounds amazing. Like a real, I want to say, overcoming story, because you've come from people telling you that you couldn't do it. And I mean, now you're working for a well-established newspaper. You've got your work published. So they were clearly wrong, and you clearly made a really good life for yourself, from almost studying food technology to now being a photographer. And I used to probably so happy that you did the switch and just was like, let me just take what I need to do.
Yes, I am indeed happy. I believe that, yes, there are certain careers that one maybe should try and steer away. But the thing is, you know, what do you do if you have a young person who just has a passion for something and has a talent for something, you know, and it may be something like in the art field, like where I am now. And those generally, those are the careers where you find guidance teachers and mentors tend to try and steer you away from. But I have a different take, and I feel like if that young person has a passion and they have the talent, you know, then they should go for it. You know, nothing beats passion and talent combined. And if that person is hardworking and determined, something has to give along the way. I mean, there may be a handful of people in the art field who are able to make a living out of this industry, but who's to say that person with the passion and the talent won't be one of those people? You know, you just keep knocking on doors, you just keep doing your best, and just go for it, you know.
Wow. So I guess that kind of leads to the next question of, how did you end up where you are today? Were you knocking on the doors and just giving it your best?
So I, in my, it was a 3-year course that I did. It was a national diploma in photography at Cape Peninsula of Technology, but it's called CPUT now. Yeah. And so in your second year, you had to select a company or a field where you wanted to go and do an internship for 2 weeks. And I didn't really know where I wanted to be in photography. I really didn't know. And so a friend was going to the newspaper. My passion was actually people and portraiture and just telling people's life stories with portraits. But my lecturer said to me that actually it's not a very good topic to score high marks for the end of the year. So strategically, choose something else, like maybe tweak it a bit and go for editorial portraiture. So then I thought, well, editorial, let me go and check out the newspaper. And a friend of mine, she had decided to go to the newspaper. And so I thought, well, I'll have a buddy there. Let's just do the stint for 2 weeks. And I ended up actually with the Cape Argus as a student for 2 weeks, and met some of the legends who are now mostly retired. Some even have passed on. And having them show me the ropes, just tagging along and seeing what exactly it was that they did. And I enjoyed the 2 weeks. And although I hadn't set my heart on being a news photographer, it seemed to me like a pretty risky business. And, because they were doing protests and that sort of thing. And then I just went back to college and carried on. And then when I left, it was the place where people knew me. I went there and I just asked them, hey, don't you have anything? And as it turned out, they had a freelance position at the Cape Argus, but not as a news photographer. It was doing advertising, and I was photographing houses. It was the most boring thing, actually, with the education that I had. 3 years studying and a diploma, and I was photographing houses. But as you know, and many students who are watching, that you have to start off at the bottom, because it's very, very seldom that you're going to sort of get that job that you actually studied for. Somebody's just going to take you in there and say, okay, you are now the manager of these people. So you have to start somewhere for most people, and that was the start of my journey.
Well, that actually sounds really amazing. And I do know what you mean by starting from the bottom, and you'll eventually get to where you are, because no one is really going to take a newly fresh university student and be like, here, you are now the manager. They want some of that experience, a little bit of grit with it as well.
That's true. That's true. I agree with you.
So I guess what does a photographer actually do? Because we all think our photographer, they take pictures, but what do you actually do, and what does a typical working day look like for you?
Well, I can tell you in terms of COVID regulations, and then prior to that, we used to go into the office all day. We would go in and we would have shifts. So you'd go in at 9 a.m. and you just sit in your office with all your colleagues, and then you'd have a desk person, and that desk person would be taking photographic requests from the Cape Argus, the Cape Times, and the Weekend Argus as well. And they would, that person on the desk stays on the desk. They take those requests, and then they just call you up on your extension and say, hey, I've got a job. Can you please go out and do it? And then you'd sign a slip to take out a company car. It's very important that you have a driver's license. Take out a company vehicle, and you'd then have a discussion with the journalist who put in the request, because the journalist is the person who is going to write the story. So they have to tell you, and very often you'd go out together with journalists. So while you're going out in the car, they tell you, okay, this is what this story is about. And you'd ask them, well, what angle are you taking? I'm thinking of this photo opportunity, or you just probe them a little bit and ask them, well, do you think they'll have props there? Or, are we actually going to be able to go out? If it's like a boat trip, are we going out on the boat, or are we shooting from the harbor? And the topics are just so vast. It is so vast, from political meetings, being in Parliament, and then you could go to Table Mountain the next day because maybe it's snowing on Table Mountain, so you'd rush up there, or a protest in a township. It's so vast, and through this job, I have been able to see so much. We've done shark cage diving, gliding, abseiling from Table Mountain, paragliding. Oh gosh, you just get to do so many things. It's quite amazing, and it's never boring.
Well, I could see why it would be boring. Yeah, no, you definitely
I just get so caught up. What I want to say about having a passion for any field is that it's never really a job. You're going there to do what you want to do, and they're actually paying you for it. And so in the COVID context, the photographers all work from home, and instead of using pool cars, we now use our own company cars. We liaise with an editor, so we don't have that one desk person who's coordinating all the titles. So I'm now with just one title, and then I have an editor who sends me a diary of all the stories made up by the journalist on that title. So there's about 4 journalists, and they put in writing all their stories with a description for the week. The editor coordinates that, sends it out to me, and tells me to liaise with the journalist and to tell them about picture ideas that I have for their stories. So now that is how it works, when you don't go in and sit at the office. And then I go out on my own. Sometimes I'll go with the journalist. Sometimes it's a very risky job. You go into a township, or let's say there's been a murder in Hanover Park, which was a recent story that I did. It wasn't actually a murder. A child was shot in the eye. You have to go there and go and knock on doors and perhaps find out where the parents are. You don't even know. You have an idea. So you'll say to the journalist, let's go together. It's safer, in 2 people is better than 1. You go in there, and then you can sort of ask around. You have to become streetwise in this job. Like you'd rather than ask a woman who's got a child or 2 with them for directions, rather than just a random man or guys, because obviously about crime and stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it, stuff that happens that you don't even think about what you're doing anymore, around safety, because safety is such a big issue for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could see how it is quite dangerous, especially when you're going into areas where the people aren't that keen on sharing information as well, because of, I don't know, like gang violence or things. It's very close communities. Not everybody wants to tell the journalist who shot the child in the eye, because then it might fall back on them. So I can see why it could be quite dangerous.
Yeah, you're quite right about that. And we have ways of dealing with that as well. Obviously, when you go in there, you do want to come back with something. So let's say you do meet the mom, and she says, well, I don't think it's safe for me to talk. You could then ask the mother to speak anonymously, and you could go with a photograph just showing the area. So you'll show the flats and the people mulling around, or maybe just a pretty picture which just shows the people and the laundry that always hangs on the line, and then the flats in the background, and maybe there's a dog walking through, or you could ask her if you could take her photograph as a silhouette. So she'll say, well, okay, if you can't recognize me, that's fine. And then you can do a silhouette in various ways, or you could have her wear a scarf so that you can't be identified, or, a photograph from the back, something like that.
Yeah, so there's definitely ways to work around situations like that. But it's nice knowing that you have, the dangerous part, but you also have the fun part, like you said, with the shark cage diving. I don't think I'd be able to do that, but it sounds like it was a wonderful experience.
Yes. Well, I was the photographer on that one. My daughter went on the trip as well, and she actually got into the cage. And I didn't get in. I just didn't, I was going to use an underwater camera, but when I looked at the situation, I could see that it wasn't really going to work. And so, I mean, she'd had the experience, went in the cage. I saw the sharks from the boat where it was quite safe. And gosh, it was quite an experience just to see how they actually leap out of the water to grab the meat, the chum that, that they throw in. Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was all just viewed from the cage, but clearly it's something a bit more crazy than that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should move on to the next question, which kind of, I guess, would stem from what we spoke about now with the more violent part, or a little bit more of the dangerous part of the job, because we want to know what are some of the challenges that you have faced as a woman specifically in this industry, because like you said, like there are some more dangerous, and as a woman in South Africa today, it's not as easy to maneuver around certain situations.
Yes. Yeah, it is a challenge being a woman, just as it's a challenge being white or black or colored, or I don't really think about it, but whatever you are, however you present in the world, it is a challenge, because if you are white and you're going into a township, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And so opportunists may then say, okay, this person doesn't really know the area, doesn't really know the place. It's a soft target. Male or female, doesn't matter. If you're black and you're going into a predominantly white area, like Constantia, for example, you will have so little success in trying to get your pictures done, because people would then view somebody of color as a possible threat. I mean, that is just the reality of the dynamic of where we live. Oh, sorry, man, my dog is keeping on.
No, it's okay.
And so as a woman, I try not to focus on it, and say hello. I try not to focus on it, but yes, there are certain instances where being a woman in the industry is a challenge. Firstly, it's male dominated. The photographic industry, it's male dominated. And but I have found that it is important for companies who are hiring photographers to have females on staff. So so it's not as if it really puts you at a disadvantage for a job, because certainly where I work, we've always had female photographers on staff. We've had two for the longest time. At the moment, in Cape Town, I am the only female photographer. It's little things, because look, where you are at an advantage for being a woman is that when you're approaching people and it's a sensitive area and subject, and we do a lot of interviews with rape victims, and we recently did an interview with 3 children who were actually trafficked by their own mother. So, and they were all underage, they were all under 18. So as a woman, it's so much easier to get through to them. And because you're less of a threat,
Yeah.
and there's that softer touch. So for a man, that would be maybe a little bit more difficult. For rape victims, it's easier if you're a woman. Very often when we had a rape story, the desk editor would choose one of the female photographers because it was a sensitive subject. You don't know how the victim would feel about speaking openly to a man. Disadvantages, oh gosh. There's sometimes you get into a situation where it's a hard news story, it's a breaking news story, and there's just a crowd of photographers and journalists. There are so many people. And so maybe it's a little bit more of a challenge to push through to the front to get that angle. Generally speaking, men tend to be a bit taller than women. So, it's easy for them to just shoot over the top. Whereas then, it becomes a bit of a challenge because, the height thing, and also physically, I may not be as strong as my counterparts. And so, you've got to push your way and just make sure that you get that picture anyway, because there's no way you're going back to the office empty-handed. I mean, that it's not on. You've got to get something. And the thing is, with a story like that, it's hard news. It's published in all the papers. And what the editors do typically is they check the papers the following day, and they see what do we have versus what our competition has. And if they've got that picture and you don't have it, you're going to have to answer for that. So I don't feel like too many challenges. I don't feel like I've been disadvantaged in terms of getting job opportunities. So not too much.
No, definitely. I do understand. And I mean, some of the, I guess, like you could say, the disadvantages are small things. Not that like being shorter or weaker, in certain situations is not a disadvantage, but at least it's not something that is greatly prejudicing you in a way that could, result in some real like emotional or traumatic situations,
Look, I probably have to mention that, if you are going to a volatile area, or let's say a high crime area, that being female, and also with the statistics around, excuse me, with the statistics around crime on women, it is a consideration. You have to consider it when going into a dangerous area, when you're going into an area that has recordings of very high violence on women and children. You have to consider that, and and make your decisions based on that. If you do have an option, maybe to take somebody with you, then do that. But it has never stopped me from going into an area that my male counterpart would have gone into. There are certain conditions and areas that you don't go into. Like if you have shooting happening now in on the Cape Flats, let's say it's Lavender Hill. You have shooting happening there now. You get the news now. It's happening now. Whether you're male or female or old or young, you're not going to go in there because no story is worth your life.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are situations that we don't go into, but whether you're male or female, it doesn't really matter. When you go in as a woman, you take your precautions. You are on high alert. You obviously have your doors locked of your car. My windows are also tinted quite dark, which helps. And you're very alert. You don't have your phone out, for example, so that when you're at the stop street, people can see, oh, here's a phone, here's a camera. Keep things concealed. Try and blend in. Try not to have like a fancy car or something that's going to really stand out anyway. So yeah, that's my take on the female thing.
No, I definitely hope that some of our attendees can get some really good points, so that when they do enter the situations, they know exactly what to do, But I think we should ask the last question, which is like a good ending to all of this, because I think you've given like such a lot of good advice. But I think the next question would be, what is some advice that you would give to students starting out, like really trying to make it, or just something that you wish that you knew when you before you started?
So I'm assuming it's specific to my field.
Yeah, specific to, or it could just be like a general piece of advice. It doesn't have to be specific to photography.
There's something about my field which is quite important and relevant, which is that students, if they have a passion for photography, it's going to be advisable that you study journalism on some level. If you want to major in photography and do the photographic course, the diploma, try and study journalism on some level, because these days, it's not like the old days where they would hire a bunch of photographers and then a bunch of journalists. For most part of it, people hiring now want somebody who's an all-rounder. They will hire a journalist who can take photographs. So it's very important that you are able to write stories. And so for me, I have had to learn while on the job. And there are times when I have to write stories. It doesn't happen very often. Fortunately, you know, I am still employed as a photographer. But these days, it's more likely somebody's going to be employed as a multimedia journalist. So you need to be able to skill yourself in writing, videography, and still photography. And videography is another aspect that it's also very nice to have. So my advice for anybody wanting to do photography is do a course in journalism. Make sure you can write. Do a course in videography. Make sure you can use a video camera and that you can edit. And those three things together, and of course the driver's license, very important, will set you in good stead to be able to practice photography, but at the same time make you employable. Because if you're only going to have photography and you're starting out, it is going to be a challenge, I think. It is going to be a challenge. Yes.
I can definitely see. I mean, I know a lot of companies in a lot of different fields nowadays are looking for a all-rounder, not just somebody who has the highest marks or has the best talent, but they are looking for an all-rounder because, I mean, with so many people looking for the jobs, you could get 50 people that all have the exact same marks, but what makes that one person out of that 50 the one that we want to hire? So I definitely think that was some good needed advice.
Thank you.
No, well, thank you for actually speaking to us and joining us for this webinar and taking the time out of your day to meet and just give pearls of wisdom to students that wish to become photographers or even just joining any industry. I'm sure you could use this advice for anything that you do.
Yes. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
I'll see you. Bye.
Bye.